Across the mountains of the Middle East lives a nation of over 30 million people, a nation with its own language, culture, and flag, but no country to call home. They have fought alongside world powers, built autonomous governments, and survived endless wars, yet remain stateless. Who are the Kurds, and why after a century of promises and betrayals, do they still not have a country? The Kurds are an ancient people, an ethnic group native to the mountains of modern-day Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Their homeland, known as Kurdistan, stretches across this rugged terrain, but is not marked on any official map. They speak their own language, Kurdish, and trace their history back thousands of years to the Medes, one of the early Iranian peoples. But unlike their neighbors, Arabs, Persians, and Turks, the Kurds never formed a unified state. Their identity was shaped by geography. Isolated mountain communities divided by empires, and they were fiercely independent. For centuries, Kurds lived under the rule of empires such as the Ottomans, Turks, and later Europeans. But after World War I, the Ottoman Empire ceased to exist, and that changed everything. When the war ended, new borders were drawn by foreign hands. European powers such as France and England divided this region to serve their own interests. Among this plan, Kurdish independence was one small hope. In 1920, the Treaty of Sèvres promised the creation of a Kurdish state, a homeland carved out of the ruins of an empire. For the first time in history, the dreams of Kurdistan seemed real. But 3 years later, everything changed. As Turkish nationalists rose under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the Allies replaced the treaty with another, the Treaty of Lausanne. This piece of paper erased Kurdistan from the map completely, and the borders of Turkey, Syria, and Iraq were complete, and the Kurdish people were spread across these vast territories. A promise was made to these people, but was almost broken immediately, leaving them divided but connected. When the treaty was signed, the ink on the new borders sealed the fate of entire people. Overnight, the Kurds found themselves between four new nations: Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Each of these countries and their governments would go on to define the Kurdish people, not by who the Kurds were, but how much they could control them. In Turkey, a new young republic saw Kurdish identity as a threat. The word Kurdistan was banned. Even speaking Kurdish in public could lead to arrest, or worse. The government also called Kurds quote-unquote mountain Turks. These were attempts to erase Kurdish identity and language completely. Revolts erupted throughout the 1920s and 30s. Such as uprisings like Dersim in 1937, which was crushed by Turkish security forces. Entire villages were bombed and displaced, but the Kurds didn't stop resisting. They learned how to survive in the silence. Across the border in Iraq, the story unfolded differently, but with the same pain. When Britain took control of the new Iraqi state, Kurdish leaders thought their service during the war would grant them autonomy, but instead they were met with betrayal. In the 1960s, Kurdish revolts were met with airstrikes and lethal force. Then came Saddam Hussein, and with him, one of the darkest chapters in Kurdish history. During the Anfal campaign of the late 1980s, Saddam's regime used chemical weapons against Kurdish towns, most infamously in Halabja, where thousands of civilians, men, women, children were killed in a single day. In Iran, Kurdish revolts were just as relentless, and so was the response. After the 1979 revolution, Kurdish groups demanded autonomy, but the new Islamic Republic crushed them with overwhelming force. As of today, all Kurdish parties are banned, and activism is seen as rebellion. And then there was Syria, where the Kurds weren't just silenced, they were made invisible. For decades, Syrian Kurds were denied citizenship entirely. They were erased from the state registry, being forbidden to own land and travel freely, or even name their children in Kurdish. The borders drawn by foreign powers achieved their goal, to keep the Middle East manageable by division. But for Kurds, those lines were wounds that never healed. Still, the dream of Kurdistan didn't die, it just went underground, carried in songs, stories, and a language that refused to fade. Today, more than 100 years after the Treaty of Lausanne, the Kurdish nation still exists, but not on a map. Instead, there are 4 Kurdistans, each trapped inside another country's borders. In Iraq, the Kurds have built something remarkable: the Kurdish Regional Government, or the KRG. The KRG govern this semi-autonomous region in the north. It has its own parliament, government, and military forces. The Kurdish flag flies free around Erbil and Sulaymaniyah, and travelers can enter on visas issued by the Kurdish authorities rather than Baghdad. For many Kurds, this is the closest they have ever come to independence. Erbil has modern skyscrapers, bustling markets, and international ties, even in its own oil deals, but behind that success lies constant tension. The Iraqi government controls the budget, and every negotiation feels like autonomy can be taken away at any moment. Across the border in Syria, the Kurdish story takes a different turn. Amidst the chaos of civil war, Syrian Kurds carved their own region out of the country, called Rojava. Rojava's leaders built a new kind of society, based on direct democracy, gender equality, and ethnic inclusion, an experiment rarely seen in the Middle East. Women served as commanders, and local councils make decisions instead of a central government. For a brief moment, it looked like the Kurdish dream might finally take root, not through conquest, but through cooperation. The success of the autonomous region of Rojava brought a lot of eyes onto it, including those of Turkey. The Turks viewed the Syrian Kurds as an extension of the PPK, a militant group that has fought for decades. Turkish forces invaded in 2019, pushing thousands of Kurdish families from their homes and shrinking Rojava's territory by nearly half. The Syrian Kurds turned to the USA for help, but you already know what they said. No. Nonetheless, the US troops eventually withdrew. Further east in Iran, the Kurdish people face tight restrictions. Political parties are banned, and activists face imprisonment or worse. Iranian Kurdish areas around the countries remain the poorest, and many Kurds fled the country looking for safety or work. In Turkey, millions of Kurds live under constant suspicion. While some Kurdish media, language, and performances are now permitted, political crackdowns are unfortunately frequent. Elected Kurdish officials are forcibly removed from offices, and anyone supporting Kurdish autonomy is considered a terrorist. Across the region, the Kurdish story is a mosaic. So why don't the Kurds have a country? Because when the modern Middle East was carved out after World War I, their homeland was treated like a crossroads, not a nation. The British and the French divided the region according to their interests, and the Kurds were simply left out. The new states that replaced the Ottoman Empire all inherited a piece of Kurdish land. To each of them, Kurdish independence was a threat. It meant surrendering territory, identity, and control. And once those borders were drawn, undoing them became almost impossible. The Kurds don't lack the things that make a country. They have flags, armies, governments, language, shared culture, and a clear homeland. But what they don't have is recognition. Because recognition requires power, and power in the modern world is rarely given freely. The reality is simple and cruel. A Kurdish state would draw borders of 4 countries. It would threaten governments that depend on those borders for their stability. The Kurds remain where they've always been, living inside borders that were never meant to include them. Yet through it all, they built something rare. A national identity that exists entirely because people refuse to let it die. Children in Erbil still learn Kurdish songs. Villagers in the Zagros Mountains still raise the flag of a country that doesn't officially exist. Borders are human inventions, and while they erase people, the people don't disappear, they wait. So the answer isn't just the Kurds don't have a country, it's that the world decided they shouldn't, and somehow they still do, just not on paper. A country made of memory, of language, of resistance, a nation without a state, but not without a soul. Thanks for watching, and subscribe.